Murray Watt, welcome to the program.
G'day, David. Good to be with you.
So, look, you're joining us obviously from Brisbane, and I'll get to the situation there with the ex-tropical cyclone in a moment. Can I first get your reaction to last night's result here in Western Australia? Does it buoy your hopes about what's coming in the federal election?
Well, certainly it's a very encouraging result, David, and full marks to Premier Roger Cooke and his team, the whole of WA Labor. They've shown they're a formidable government and a formidable campaign machine. And I think what we saw last night in WA is clear proof that Western Australians trust Labor when it comes to supporting them with their cost of living, supporting them to get their wages lifted in these times of needs, and support them with their essential services, things like health and schools. So it's obviously a very strong endorsement for Premier Cooke and WA Labor, and we certainly take heart from that.
Does it show that those voters trust Labor on cost of living when we did see very significant swings in the outer suburbs in areas that include the federal seats of Pearce and Hasluck?
Look, I don't think that anyone expected that WA Labor would maintain the remarkable results that they achieved at the last federal election. So there was always going to be some degree of a correction, but as you and your partners there this morning have observed, the correction was nowhere near as much as what people expected. And the other really interesting feature about this is that the votes that Labor did lose in WA haven't gone across to the Liberal Party or the National Party en masse. They've been spread around, and I think that's a clear indication that Western Australians, like most Australians, understand that the Liberal Party, both state-wise and federally, have no plan to assist people with cost of living.
So based on the sort of results we saw then last night, surely you should hold those 4 seats unless there's something wrong when it comes to how the Albanese government is connecting with these voters.
Well, we certainly are very hopeful of remaining those seats, and of course there's a couple of extra seats that we will be chasing hard in the federal election based in and around Perth, seats like Moore and Bullwinkle. I mean, I think the other thing that we saw throughout this campaign was a lot of infighting. I think we can, and we've got great candidates in the field in those seats. They're highly marginal seats. Our existing members have been working incredibly hard and have developed very strong local profiles. But as I was saying, I think what we saw through the WA campaign was a lot of infighting within the Liberal Party and between the Liberal and National parties. That's going to play out again in Bullwinkle, where you've got a 3-cornered contest between Labor, Liberals and Nationals. So we'll be fighting very hard to maximise the number of seats we can achieve in WA, as we will across the country.
Well, let's turn now to what's happening where you are. We can see the rain coming down behind you, and I can tell you even in the last 10 minutes the visibility of those buildings behind you has become more difficult as well. Just describe the situation for us in Brisbane this morning.
Yeah, I've noticed that myself, David, since I perched on this chair. The weather has become even worse here in Brisbane. And of course, this is now expanding across a very wide part of southeast Queensland, the South Burnett inland and northern New South Wales as well. The key message that we've been trying to get out for the last couple of days to people is that this is far from over. There was a bit of a view yesterday that when the cyclone was downgraded to a tropical low, that meant everything was okay and that it had been a fizzer. That is absolutely not the case. We are facing very heavy rainfall across southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales over the next couple of days. Already we're seeing river levels rise, and we've had major flood warnings provided for rivers that cross major population centres in the region. So no one should be thinking that this is over. We've really got to make sure that people stay connected, listen to warnings, stay out of waterways, avoid flooded roads. This could still be a very dangerous weather system yet.
I mentioned earlier that the Prime Minister's confirmed there are 6 of those defence personnel with serious injuries. Is there any more you can tell us about that one?
I don't have any further information on that this morning, David, but I know the Prime Minister will be providing further updates. But obviously for all Australians, we're incredibly sad to see these heroes in the ADF seriously injured in a motor vehicle accident. I remember from the last Lismore floods seeing so many Army personnel down there helping in the recovery, and in this case they were down there to help with the preparedness and recovery. So, you know, they go out of their way to protect other people, and it's really sad to see some of them seriously injured. I think all Australians want to see them recover as quickly as possible.
The Prime Minister has pointed to climate change as a factor in the increased frequency and severity of events like this, and we've heard that in previous events as well. Can I ask, will Labor, if you win another term, if you're re-elected, will Labor keep opening or approving new coal and gas projects?
Well, just as we've done this term, David, we will continue to consider each project on its merits, and each project, of course, has to pass environmental approvals. As the Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, has approved a small number of coal mines, usually extensions of existing mines, but she's also knocked back coal mines as well, which haven't met those environmental tests. That's the approach that we'll be taking. But of course, the clear thing that what we want to do if we are re-elected is continue massive investments in expanding our renewable network. And that's where we are going to see a massive difference between the parties, with Peter Dutton and his coalition pursuing this nonsense nuclear plan, which will cost $600 billion and not provide any energy for 20 years or so.
OK, but events like this don't change your view on the need to keep opening fossil fuel projects?
Well, we are seeing a reduction in the number of coal mines that are seeking approvals to open, and that's in recognition that the world is changing and demand is gradually changing, particularly for thermal coal, which powers coal-fired power stations. And at the same time, we're seeing a massive expansion in renewables. That's the way the market is going. And certainly if Labor retains power, we want to continue on that path towards more renewable power. It's a real shame that we haven't got bipartisanship on that, and that Peter Dutton wants to waste immense amounts of money on a nuclear scheme that will drive up power prices.
Now, the election, we know, will now be held in May. There won't be an April election. That means the government will be having to produce a full budget. Look, what can we expect from this budget? Will there be any serious reform to try and repair the bottom line?
Yeah, look, first of all, I would say I think it was the right call from the Prime Minister to not call the election today. It shows that our government's only priority right now is focusing on the needs of millions of people in this region with the floods. And that's pretty different to Peter Dutton's priorities. You saw that he jetted off to a fundraiser at Sydney Harbourside this week when his own community was actually trying to get prepared for this event. So he was filling Liberal Party money bags while his own community was filling sandbags, which I think says a lot about him. When it comes to the budget, what you can expect is a similar approach to what we've taken in our previous budgets. Both Jim Chalmers and Katie Gallagher have been working on this for months, this budget. You can expect a continuation of the responsible economic management that we've displayed in the last couple of years, a tight rein on spending, but also providing cost of living relief where we can to support Australians. I think the other thing that's really noteworthy, though, David, with this budget is that increasingly we're seeing evidence that we have turned a corner with the economy. Everyone knows that the last couple of years have been really tough for Australians, and of course the conditions that we inherited were going backwards for Australians. But not only are we now seeing real wages rise while unemployment remains low, we're bringing down inflation, and you would have seen the national accounts figures this week that show that we've had a strong rebound in growth. Including in the private sector. So I think that's really encouraging as we look ahead.
OK, but we've still got a structural deficit. I think it's deficits as far as we can see for the next 10 years. The question is there going to be any serious reform to fix that?
Well, I think any fair observer would see the efforts that we've made in the last couple of years to try to fix some of those structural problems that we inherited in the budget. We've delivered 2 consecutive surpluses, something that hasn't been achieved for decades. So we've demonstrated that we are prepared to make hard decisions around spending. But
to be fair, that's had a lot to do with the resources profits, though, hasn't it?
Well, that's been part of it, but so has the reining in spending. And I can tell you as a portfolio minister, I haven't been able to get every proposal that I've wanted to spend money through the ERC, and that would be the same for my colleagues. We've also
others have, because spending's gone up.
Well, you would see that spending is very similar to what it has been under previous coalition governments in percentage terms, and that's at a time when people have needed financial support. I mean, we could have taken the Peter Dutton approach of stopping spending and not providing cost of living relief. We could have stopped energy bill rebates. We could have stopped cheaper medicines, but that would have actually made life harder for Australians over the last couple of years, and that wasn't our approach. Let me ask you this. If
the 2 surpluses help put downward pressure on inflation, as the government has long argued, what will deficits do to inflation?
Well, you've seen multiple comments from the Reserve Bank Governor that she has no serious concerns about the level of government spending, and that's not contributing to the inflation. And as you've seen, that we've actually brought down inflation over the last couple of years rather than driven it up. That's what we want to continue doing. We will always take into account the impact of government spending on the economy and inflation. But I think it's a really positive thing that our economic management is now resulting in interest rates falling as well as inflation falling, and that's the way we want to keep things.
Let me ask you about your own portfolio in workplace relations. What are your plans in the next term should you win the election? What will you be doing on industrial relations?
Well, we'll obviously have more to say about this, as we will across all portfolios in the run-up to the election, David. But what I can say is that we remain committed to the laws that have actually delivered real wage increases to Australians for the first time in many years. And again, we saw every single one of these changes we made to workplace laws opposed by Peter Dutton and the Coalition. So again, not only were they opposing cost of living relief, they were opposing wage rises for Australians and wanted to make life harder for people. They're on the record saying that if they win the next election, they will unwind a number of the changes that we've made, which would see people's pay reduce. We want to keep pay rising.
I'm just asking what you're going to do, and this term we certainly saw Labor do things that you didn't take to the election. So will there be surprises after the election? Are you keen on some of the ideas the ACTU's putting forward, including an entitlement to 12 days of reproductive leave? Is that something you'll do?
Well, we're obviously giving consideration to a range of things that different people have put forward. The ACTU have put forward ideas, business groups have put forward ideas, and we're still considering those, and we'll make some announcements through the campaign. I guess what I'm saying to you though, David, is that you can trust Labor, and your viewers can trust Labor with the general principle that we want to see wages rising and rising ahead of inflation. It took a Labor government to change our laws to see that happen. When we came to office, we'd seen 5 quarters in a row of real wages falling, wages not keeping pace with inflation. We will go into the next election with 5 quarters in a row under Labor of real wages rising above inflation. That's the way we want to see things, because workers in Australia deserve a fair pay rise and they deserve support through this cost of living pressure times.
But there is a chorus of voices saying you've got to do something about productivity. That's how you really get wages, real wages growing. I mean, you've got the likes of Bill Kelty, Ken Henry, all saying productivity must be improved. What are you going to do to improve productivity?
You certainly won't get any argument from anyone in our government that we do need to lift Australia's productivity. And again, I have to make the point that when we came to office, productivity was falling. In fact, the decade leading into our election, it was the lowest productivity growth decade that we'd seen in about 60 years. So it is going to take time to turn this around. But our focus in terms of lifting productivity is things like investing in skills, investing in training of our people, investing in the energy transition, competition reform, those types of things. We don't believe, and there's no evidence to support the case, that cutting people's wages and conditions delivers higher productivity. If that had been right, we would have seen productivity growth rising under the Coalition when they were cutting people's wages. In fact, we saw the opposite. We saw productivity falling. So that wasn't the way forward either.
The Coalition wants to get more public servants back working in the office rather than working from home. Do you know how many public servants are working full-time from home at the moment?
Look, I don't have those figures to hand myself, but I suspect it'd be a pretty low proportion. The public servants that I work with, who are based, I might say, right around the country. I mean, this notion that Peter Dutton is going to cut 36,000 public servants and they're all Canberra-based shows how little he knows about how the public service operates. His emergency management spokesperson was in the media this week in the lead up to a cyclone, flagging the possibility of cuts to emergency services personnel who are based right around the country. So when it comes to work from home, though, we recognise that it's a flexible workplace. For that matter, my staff work in multiple cities around the country. Sometimes they're in the office, sometimes they're at home. They do a great job working for me, as do the public servants working for me. And I think the other point about this work from home policy, David, that's really concerning is that when Peter Dutton was challenged about this week, and the point that some women work some days from home, some days in the office, his solution was that they should job share. So what he's saying is that someone who might work 2 days a week at home, 3 days in the office, has to stop working 2 days and lose money in their pay. So it doesn't matter which way you look at it, he's got pay cuts in mind for everyone, whether it's women working from home, casuals, labour hire workers, and that will just make life a lot harder for Australians.
Look, just a final issue, Murray Watt. I know it's a little outside your portfolio, but it's another, I guess, external event that the government is weathering, and that, of course, is Donald Trump. Over the past week, we've seen him cut off military support for Ukraine and intelligence sharing as well. This is a question a lot of people have been asking through the ABC's Your Say initiative, whether the US is still a reliable ally. Is it?
Yes, we do think that the US is a reliable ally, and of course the US remains our major security partner across the world. We know that there's strong bipartisan support in the US for the alliance with Australia, for the AUKUS project as well. So we do consider them a reliable ally. Some of the things that we've seen from the new administration aren't significantly different to the approach they took in the last time they were elected.
Very different approach on Ukraine,
and
well, a very different approach with respect on Ukraine and the threat of tariffs. We might find out in a few days we're going to be hit with tariffs. So is there anything Donald Trump has done that makes you think he's reliable?
Well, I mean, for instance, the comments that he's already made about AUKUS and his administration officials have made about AUKUS demonstrate their commitment to that project, and we remain committed to that as well. You know, as you've heard many of us say, we're not going to provide a running commentary on things that President Trump has to say. I will make the point again, what we won't be doing though is copying a range of policies from the US in the way that Peter Dutton is doing. He's already said that he's essentially going to have the US-style Department of Government Efficiency making slashing cuts to the public service. This work-from-home policy that he announced this week was directly lifted from the US, as was the diversity and inclusion. We're going to run Australian policy for Australians.
I can detect a campaign theme here. Just a final one, Murray Watt, and look, you may not know the answer to this, but just on intelligence sharing to Ukraine. Intelligence from the joint facility at Pine Gap, is that intelligence being shared with Ukraine?
Look, that's outside my portfolio, and I expect that probably no minister would talk publicly about what sort of intelligence we've been sharing, but happy for you to put that to the relevant portfolio ministers.
All right, we'll do that. Murray Watt, appreciate you joining us from a pretty wet and windy Brisbane. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, David.